and Power Platform. And it provides storage. It's basically relational storage for relational data, image, file. It's got some enterprise capabilities that are built in there in this one-click solution deployment. We'll talk about some of the things we've got there in just a couple moments. And it's included for every Teams customer governed by IT. So the vast majority of Teams licenses are going to include this out of the box at no additional cost. It's basically a database that's got 2 gigabytes of storage that's available to you. And we'll talk a little bit more as we go. You can see here on the right, this is the table designer. If the people from Microsoft are probably annoyed with my joke that I tell all the time, that I look at this and it's kind of like if Access and Excel had a baby. You'll see that live in just a minute. It's a great way. You'll see how you can create, scheme, and populate data very, very quickly. So earlier this week, we announced general availability for a number of capabilities across the Power Platform. So with Dataverse for Teams, we talked about the relational data a minute ago, but it also includes the ability for you to use Power Apps, Power Automate, and Power Virtual Agents. And so with Power Apps within Teams, we've got this embedded Power Apps Studio. We've got some great ready-made solutions, we call them out-of-the-box apps internally here, that allow you to get these great solutions that look like they were born and inside of Teams. They look great, and you can edit them, and whether you want to extend them, just use them out of the box or learn from them. We've got those that are there. We've got Dataverse for Teams sort of that comes there out of the box. We also have Teams Admin Center, and they've introduced responsive app containers. Now, at Power Automate, again, you've got easy to use templates, and we call a diet designer that's in there. We've got integrated approvals, including e-sign integrations. We've got improved automation for Teams, channels, chats, and meetings there, and some new automation entry points. And then for PVA, you'll have, and we'll see today, an embeddable Power Virtual Agent Studio in Teams. You've got bot publishing to Teams App Store, personalized bot responses specific to the end user. And then we've got these capabilities that are seeded, as we talked about, and again, it's using Dataverse for Teams. So one of the things that we did announce this week that wasn't, we had a public preview we announced at our Ignite conference just a little bit ago, but with GA, we also introduced the ability for you to use Dataverse for Teams and Power BI. And so in this case, you would need to have a license for Power BI, but if you're a licensed user, you can go ahead and use what we have called a TDS endpoint that's there. You can use Power BI reports and create them inside of Power BI Desktop. You can do paginated reports and generate PDFs. And if you want to write queries, it's got a great visual look and feel in terms of the working with the tables. But if you want to go ahead and write a query for that report, you can write it in SQL. So a lot of folks that are doing reports today have that available to them. Now, if we look here, you can see that you can install Power Platform solutions with a single click. We have a number of these out-of-box solutions that we ship, and you'll be able to do some of this in near term. You can see here I'm able to go ahead and find this and install it really easily from the Teams store. So you've got built-in security and governance. So it's Microsoft Dataverse for Teams. It's like Microsoft Dataverse, which if folks are familiar with the Common Data Service, which is now called Microsoft Dataverse, it's got many of the capabilities that are there. So you're built on a really strong foundation, but it focuses on Teams. And so if you think about Teams, what are the types of core roles that are in that environment? You've got owners, members, and guests. So that's going to be part of what's there. Now, access to the environment is restricted just to team owners, members, and guests, and you have the ability to assign different security roles to owners and members within there. And there's no security settings management for business unit and team required there. So you're really getting a fairly targeted view there. And so what I'm going to do now is I'm going to go ahead and shift over to Power Apps. And let me show you what it looks like. So, and you know what, I have people tell me, so before anyone on the call tells me, Mark, you got a really wide monitor. Can you zoom that in a little bit? So we've just done that so you could take a look. Now, if you want to get Power Apps, what you're going to do is you click the 3 dots here, you type Power. Guess what? You can go ahead and install Power Apps. That snazzy new icon. I've already got it installed, so I would click on this, and I get this view. And so what's here? I can see my recent applications. If I want to create an app, I can do it right here. If I wanted it to do install one of those apps that I told you about, we have 3 templates: employee ideas, inspection, and issue reporting. So these are really, really slick apps that are there. I can click on them and install one to a channel. If I want to learn Power Apps, if I've not done it before, I can learn down here. And then I can also navigate up here to what's called the Build Hub. Okay, and in Build Hub, now you see all these on the left-hand side. These are all different teams that are inside of my tenant, right? You can see right now I'm in the samples tenant. But if I wanted to, I could navigate over here to, let's say, hands-on labs. And here I can see different sets of resources that are put in there for hands-on labs. If I clicked over here and installed apps, I would see if I installed one of those apps, I'd have all the assets that are there and I could edit those. But let's go ahead and go back to samples. And we're going to go ahead and create a new app. I'll show you what that is. There's something we have in here that I think is pretty darn cool. So we'll create a new app. And if you haven't noticed, this is all within Teams. Now I happen to be using the web client. Works great in the desktop client and all the places that runs. It prompts you for a name. Say, call this Hello World. Okay, that's saving that. Now, I created this in an environment that's already been created. And so one of the benefits here is that I have access to, I can create, as many apps as I want, and I can use the shared data we have across these environments. Now, you'll see that we came in here, it's got this thing here, it's like lorem ipsum text here, and what's this all about? Well, this is what we call the hero template, and this is going to solve something that you want to do really quickly. So suppose that you wanted to be able to connect to a database that you define, and we'll define a database in just a second. But suppose we want to be able to create a form that really easily makes it possible for me to edit, update, delete the records that are there. Well, this is something that I already have, and so I'm going to click on Add Data over here, and I've been doing some stuff for RSS feeds, right? And so that's an app I'll show you in just a minute. So if I click on this, you can see it's adding that existing table in here, and look at that. It's already wired everything up for me. These are RSS feeds, so we've have like graphics, we've got text, we've got titles. I've got a database. I can go ahead and wire that up from scratch in an instant. But you know what? Suppose I want to create some new data. So suppose that I wanted to create a new table. I just click this right here. It's going to ask me to give me a name. So we'll say Hello World Data. We'll just call it that. There are a couple of advanced settings in here. If I wanted to say what that would be plural, I can specify that. Like if I had this as presentation, and this would be presentations, but I'll go ahead and click create. And so great, we've got this experience that I've been bragging about earlier. Let me show you some of the payoff for what's here. So this starts off with something called name. And so this is going to be a column you'll have in every table. If I wanted to, I could rename that, right? I can go ahead and call this Hello World ID. I can go ahead and change that if I want to. And it's text. I could say, you know what, let's make it 255. That's great. But now, great, I now have an ID that's in here, but I'd like to do some more. Let me go ahead and say, you know what, I'd like to be able to include a different type. Instead of text, what if I wanted to capture a web link? So I can say this is homepage. And I can say that the length here starts off at 100. We're going to make that 255 because I've got some experience with URLs recently. And then maybe also I want to add, you can see all the common types that are here. And by the way, URL and phone, those are all going to automatically check the formats for that. But suppose I wanted to add something, and we'll say for this audience, are we having fun? I hope the answer to that is yes. But you can see once
yes, of course.
Chuck, I'll give you $5 later. Thanks for that. When we go ahead and add a record in here, I can go ahead and see there's a toggle. So I get a nice toggle display that's in here. And the last thing I'll show you in here is a choice, right? We'll call it, which is your favorite? And I'll go ahead and do choice. And then here I'll say, I'm a big fan of ice cream, although I'm a bit under the weather at the moment, but when I'm not, I like ice cream. So I could say chocolate, vanilla, and strawberries, but I'm creating these things. But then I could also come over here and give these different colors that'll show up inside of my list. And you know what? I lied. I'm going to show you one more thing over here. We'll just show you how that works. Suppose. So see how that looks? It looks great. It's got the colors. and that will work out well when I'm working with data. And then the last thing, I'm going to show you something called a lookup column. So I can go ahead and say, you know what? I want people, when they define this, to be able to specify something in one of the other tables that's in here. So maybe I want to associate this with one of the feeds that I was just talking about. And I'll just call this feed. And so what's great now is if I want people to go ahead, and it's going to bring this in for us. I can click on this and I can see all the different feeds that are out there. So we can get sort of the less code, more power feed that's done by Donna Socker and folks on our team. I can go ahead over here. And I've got this great experience. Now, one of the things here is if I go ahead and add a new column, you can see that I've got a set of data types here. This is actually a subset of the data types we have available to you. So if you were to go over here, which we'll do right now, and go back to our build hub, I can go ahead and look at the entire environment that's here and see everything that's in there. So I can see my apps, I can see my tables. And so if I were to go into, where's our Hello World data? And I wanted to add a column here, you're going to see here that I've got a lot more options. I've got 23 options actually. That's going to cover a number of things. You're going to have file, you're going to have image, you're going to have a number of things. I'll show you a slide in a minute that gives you the breakdown, and we can share the slides with you afterwards so you've got that as a reference. I can also add relationships. We'll talk about relationships in a moment. I've got some slides that look for that. And then views. And remember these words, we're going to go back to them in just a couple of minutes. But I showed you how we could work with data. I do want to show you an app, and so the art of what's possible here. It's just an app. We have a lab online that helps you do some of this. We're going to show you the whole thing in a little bit when we get to the next part of the presentation. But let me show you just sort of the art of the possible that's here. So we looked at the basics, and you can drag and drop controls and whatnot. But I'm going to take you through this in just a couple of minutes. And so this is an app that anyone can build. It's actually really easy to do. I can go ahead and select, this is that list of feeds. Remember that feed table we saw a minute ago? I can see all the feeds that are there, but then I can also use the filtering that's available inside of Dataverse for Teams to show me, hey, can you just show me the most recent ones from all of these? Can you show me the ones that are top rated? Could we introduce this concept of a playlist where I could say, you know what, there's a bunch of videos that I want to use for a training course, or that I want to use that'll be helpful for people in my project, or maybe it's stuff I want to watch later. And then there are favorites that I can have. And so if we come over here, just look at each of your screens, you can also see that we've got this playlist viewer. And so we'll go ahead and run this now just so you can see it in action and see what it'll do for you. But I can go ahead and click preview here. If you've not used Power Apps before, you can do that. Now, of course, I zoomed in like crazy here. Let me zoom out a little bit. And I'm going to go ahead and say, hey, let's just look at all the stuff from More Code, Less Power, or Less Code, More Power. And so now I can see that all the videos are here. We can actually play the videos from within here. We can play the videos here. We can go ahead and rate, and it will also show me if this had been rated. We'll see the average rating that's there. If I want to add it to a playlist, I can do that. If I want to add it to my favorites, I could do that. You also have great integration with Teams, and so we've got connectors and other things like that that are there out of the box. We have information for the team you're in right now. So if you were looking at this and you said, hey, I want to share this with people in my team, I think they'd really get it, like it, I could do that as well. And then if I wanted to, I can also say, hey, you know what? That was just for that one. I want to see all of them. And could you put like this Power Apps copy item here? And so now I can get this separate list that shows everything. And then I've got this one that's there for me. So that's an example of an app you can build with this. And then I'm going to show you a chatbot. Keep in mind, these are all built against the same data. Now, this one is a sample I built over here. So we're going to go to a different environment that has where we started off a little bit ago. We'll go to see all. We'll go to our chatbots. And actually, one second, guys. I think I made a boo-boo there. Let's go to Hands-On Labs. And then we'll go to see all chatbots. Oh, you know what happened? Someone went ahead and cleaned up my environment for me. So let me go back here. And we'll go to where we just were. I used to have one in here called Test, and I was on the phone last night with my colleague from.
Mark, you might want to zoom back in a little bit.
Okay. let me get back to this, and we'll zoom in. Chatbots.
Thanks.
Video agents. Little Microsoft trick, if you want things to go faster, just spin your mouse and it'll get you there. Now this is Power Virtual Agents. This is another app that you can see. It's running on the side there. I'm going to go to the topics for this, just for folks who haven't seen this before. Here I can say how to get video content. And so there's a trigger phrase. And so I'm going to say I'd like a video. And what's going to happen is it's going to ask me for some text. And then it's going to go out to my Dataverse for Teams. And it's going to go ahead and call, it's going to call something we have called Power Automate Flow. So it's going to say, okay, hey, what's the content you were looking for? It's going to ask you that. It's going to go ahead and take the data you get here. It's going to pass it to this little Power Automate Flow. That's embedded in here as well. And this is actually pretty easy. All it does is we have a connector. Now, the thing is I talked about this being Dataverse for Teams. It used to be called the Common Data Service. And so there's a connector here that still says Common Data Service. It'll be changing out early next month. And it has a little thing called an action that allows me to do things inside of a workflow. And so what I'm saying here is say, you know what, go to that feed table and get me all the things that contain, using this contains here, in the description, whatever they entered over here. And then when it comes back, we want to go ahead and for each one of those, it's going to take the value that was in there, and it's going to say, hey, can you just make, now this may look a little bit funky, like why does this have brackets around it? Why does this have parentheses around it? Well, here's the reason why. In Power Virtual Agents, when they want to display content back to the screen, they use something called Markdown. So if people aren't familiar with Markdown, if you've ever seen a web page, it's written in HTML, so it's this markup language, so it looks great on your page. Markdown is like a simpler version of that, and that's what Power Virtual Agents uses. And so you'll see in a minute, it'll do that. There's a little condition here. I won't talk about what that is. All it basically says, if you didn't find anything, just put in, hey, I didn't find anything over here. And then it's going to return that back to Power Automate, which will display it. Well, that's all well and good, but I used to have a boss that joked that he was from Missouri, which is the show me state. So it's great you showed me all that stuff, Mark. Let me talk to me all that stuff. Let me go ahead and take a look at it. So if you look over here on the trigger phrases, it says, I'd like a video. So what content are you looking for? So I know that there's a video in there on mixed reality. So in addition to the work I do here in the Power Platform, I'm actually a bit of a VR, MR nerd. You can see here it brought back 2 videos here. And so the Markdown created a link for us. Now you say, hey, Mark, is that a bug because it's presented twice? It isn't actually. This just happens to be in 2 different feeds. People were cross-posting between one show and one of the channels. Then if I were to click on this, you can see here, that just links directly to the video, and we could do deep links into the app and other things like that. But that you just saw a chatbot using that data in Common Data Service for Teams. So you've taken a quick lap through. I want to stop for a second, answer some questions, and then I've got some additional slides where we can take a double click into a bunch of things to help you understand it a little bit more that are focused on that app you just saw, that focus on some of the common scenarios with data.
So the first question you got, Mark, is from Kanal. And the question is, does Dataverse support Teams guest persona or Active Directory foreign principals? In other words, can we share a Dataverse-based app and /record stored in Dataverse with an external guest user?
So the apps we're talking about today are apps that are deployed, and I'm using nuance in my words because I know the future. So the apps that you're creating today are in the context of a team. And so if you're a member of that team, you can have access to it. And there are certain rights that are assigned to owners, members, and guests.
Perfect. Eric Levine is wondering, is that hands-on lab published yet? Can we take a look at it?
It absolutely is. So the one that shows you just saw what my wife would call the all singing, all dancing version. We have an entry-level version of that that's available for sort of pulling in feeds, and that absolutely is out on the web today. And I will get you a link to that. It's funny because our CEO reached out yesterday, said, hey, I heard about the launch. I want to try this out. And so we got the links for him. So it is available in our documentation. And there's also a getting started one, which is more akin to what I showed you at the start. But we'll get those shared out with you by the end of the call. That's not a problem. It looks like that might be the only question we have.
That's correct.
So does it support model-driven apps? I will put no, and then I would follow that with not yet. But it is something we're working on. Okay, let's. I'm happy to answer questions interactively as we get them, Charles. But I know sometimes folks might want to do a double click, and so we can sort of pop back and forth with questions as we want. So one of the things, and I do these slides because I didn't always work for Microsoft, and I know when you see a session from someone at Microsoft, like, hey, that was cool. What did he do? And you're trying to scratch your head, and you go back to the video, or maybe you want to tell someone else. So we're going to share these in all the slides here. So one of the things, remember I talked about in our table designer, we have support for some of the types today and more coming. This gives you a list and shows you everything that's there. And so when we say CRUD, where you see CRUD, it's just, hey, can I create a value in here? Can I read a value that's in here? Can I update a value that's in here? Can I delete a value that's in here? And you'll see that there are different values for the different types that are available. And so this is really important because sometimes there are apps you want that might have like images and other things like that, and they work really great. And you know, with Power Apps, you can create apps that run on mobile, right? So you know, we've showed you the web, but there's also Teams on desktop. There's also Teams on mobile. This will work with all of them, which is great. So we show you this. The other thing we didn't talk about is we also have these capabilities to do roll-up and calculated fields. And so these can be super powerful. They're included in the table editor. It's more of an advanced feature, but you can definitely leverage that as the work you're doing. The other thing is, as you look through some of the things I just showed you, you're like, hey, some of this stuff I saw referenced something over here. It looks pretty understandable. And then there's something that's a little bit less understandable, but I could figure it out. And so I want to make sure people understood these concepts. And so there's this notion of a display name and a name. Well, the name is sort of a unique name that's in the database. And so you named it description, or I named it description in this case. And you can see descriptions over here. And then you see the CR680 underscore. Like, what's that all about? Well, that is basically a publisher ID. You don't set it. We set it for you in Teams. You know, you can set it in the full version of Dataverse. But we make that so that's unique, and that'll always be the same. This over here, you could change over time. Like we had something where it had a title, and then initially it was called name, and then someone else might want to call it feed title, or you might want to localize it to Spanish or English or other languages. And so with this can change. This is a display name. This name will stay constant. And so depending on what you're doing, it may reference either or, and I make sure to call that out as we go through. You heard me talk about relationships. So for database people, you can take a minute to look on the web for the latest news. This is something you're probably pretty familiar with, but if folks haven't seen it before, this is talking about the relationships that are available to you. You can have many to one. And so you could say a row in table A can match more than one row in table B, but each row in table B can match only one row in table A. So this class can have, you know, a number of students. I could have one to many. That classroom could have multiple classes that are in it. Or I could have many to many. I could have lots of students. I could have lots of classes, and they're all in different classes that are here. So you can, when we did that lookup I showed you earlier, that's going to give you one of these. If you want all three, and by default, you don't need to do anything. We'll do it automatically. If you want to set any of these beyond what we give you out of the box or for free in sort of that lookup field, you can create them manually inside of the Solution Explorer. You can see here, if you went to tables, you can go ahead and configure it that way. So I don't even remember, I mentioned this thing called relationships and views, right? And so we talked about relationships a second ago. Let's talk about views. And why are views important? Well, so one of the things that you want to make sure you do, especially if you have things that are running on mobile apps and or places where people may be downloading and they may not have the best download speeds and whatnot, is you want to make sure you deliver them just the data that they need for the app that you're building. And if you think about what I just showed you, there are a number of places where I might have a subset of the data, or the data might be structured differently or sorted differently. And so a query will pull together columns in a table. And if you'd like columns that are in tables that are related to that table. So I had like feeds and feed items. And so the feed items table, we created a view that we'll talk about. that also brought in feeds. And so then I had this one table that didn't just have a lookup, but had all the values that were there for me to use in a number of things that I'm working on. And we'll talk about some contextual examples in a minute. I also have filters. And so if we look at filters, let's look at how you'd set this up. So if I want to go ahead and create a view, you can see here are all the list of columns that are here in this particular table. If I come over here, I can see columns that are in my related table. And I can go ahead and double click on those and add them in here. I can give it a name, I can give it a description. Now, if I go ahead and go back one, if I go ahead and click on Edit Filters, well, I now have a UI that allows me to go ahead and create some rules. So I can define a set of rules that will help me bring back just a subset of data. And remember, this all happens on the server. So it all happens on the service. So what will happen is it'll apply these before it brings it down to your client. So if you have 100,000 rows, it's going to, and maybe you only need 100, it's going to go ahead and do that for you. Or only the ones that are 100 that are created by this user or apply to this product or this state, you'll be able to go ahead and do that. And the last thing you can do is you can do like your sorting preference for that. They're created and managed in the table editor, as I just mentioned. And we've got some that are included with every table. And then if you want to use them inside of Power Apps, there's a couple different ways to do that. So remember I mentioned they were tied to a table. So in your controls, we have the ability to bind to a data source. And so in this case, we could say it's feed items. And then for views, I can have feed items with feed detail. That's one of my views that's there. And so this will populate it automatically as soon as I pick this. Now, there are other places where you can use functions, and we'll look at those in a moment. And those look kind of like if you're doing anything in Excel, right? You've got that function at the top of the cell where you can change the formatting and other stuff. So here I just say feed items, name of my table, in parentheses views, and then feed item with feed detail. Now, if you don't remember what they are, don't worry. You'll see in a minute inside of Power Apps, it's going to do these lookups for you and go ahead and populate it for you automatically. Okay, then I'm going to show you this. This is called a patch statement. Most of you may never need a patch statement ever. In some cases, in the app I was just building, you might want a patch statement. And so think about scenarios like a rating. So we have videos, and this is something that's in my team. So it's me and Chuck and a bunch of other people in our team are looking at these videos, and we want to rate it. Well, maybe Chuck really likes this video, and I'm not that big of a fan. And so I want to be a jerk, and I'm just going to downvote this, and I'm going to try and apply like a bunch of 1-star ratings. I wouldn't do that, but just suppose I would. So if I were to do that, you want to make sure that when I apply that rating, it only happens once, right? And so with a patch, it'll do if there are database folks out there, what you might call an upsert. And so it'll either insert a new record into the database, or we'll update one if it already is there. So if I try to go and do that, all I'm doing is updating the same record there. It's not going to impact it. And so in this case, you can see that I'm updating the ratings table. And then you can see that that has a name, a user, an item, and a rating. And when you see this like item rating 2.value, that's taking the value of a rating control. And so it's very easy for me to wire this up and send it through. Again, a lot of folks are not going to need this. I include it because when you do need it, people often scratching their head saying, hey, how do I do that? And patch doesn't necessarily resonate with folks. So thought we'd share that with you. So to build out the app, we're going to build that solution that I just talked to you about. And so what are the questions we need to answer to build this out? Like, hey, maybe you've never seen Power Apps before or Dataverse for Teams. What do you do? So you figure you need to figure out, like, how do I enter details for the feeds in the database? And then how do I show a list of all the feeds in the list? And then how do I show a list sorted to show just the most recent items? And then how do I share details about the items to display items in the playlist viewer? Well, tell you what, let's go figure that out. I'm going to go ahead and pull this over here. 1 second. Bring this guy back. Okay, so now we come back to our Power Apps, and we're going to go to Samples Video Library. This is our app. Remember the Microsoft trick, if I spin it like this, everything goes faster. Unless it's Wednesday. If today's Wednesday, I got to do it the other way. All right. There we go. Okay, so the first question we had is, how do we get the data in here for these feeds? How do we want to go ahead and do that? Well, the first thing we did is we created a table, and then I did what I showed you in the beginning. And so what happened is I created my table, and this got created for me automatically. All right, so step one, we get the feeds in. That's great. Okay, now we have to get the feed items in. How do we do that? And so here, we're going to go into Power Apps. And I'm going to go, let's go to my Build Hub. And we're going to go to Samples. And here I'm going to go ahead and edit a Power Automate flow. And so you can see everything that's here. I've got one called Retrieve Videos. Great, so I have a table. How do I get data in? Well, what I want to do is for those feeds that you just saw, that list of all the feeds, you forget these are them over here. So for all these different feeds, I want to get those, loop through them, and then I want to add, and I want to loop through them since the last time I looked at it. And I want to go ahead and take all the new videos and take the metadata for those with the links and the descriptions and stuff and put it into my table. So how do I go ahead and do that? Well, I create a Power Automate flow. And so flows, if you've never used it before, they start with a trigger. In this case, it's one we call recurrent. So it's basically it's going to say, I'm going to go ahead and run this thing every so often. So in this case, every 1 day. If I wanted, I could run it every 1 minute. I could run it every 1 hour. I built this app initially, and I was testing for a feed that got updated all the time. It was during the election. And so just to test, and it scales really well, because as you might imagine, CNN was posting lots of things in their RS feed that night. I can go ahead and create some variables. I won't talk too much about those. But then what I'm going to do is I'm going to go out to my list of feeds and just say, give me all of them. Like I didn't have any filters that are there. And by the way, record the current time, because I want to make sure that I record this back in my feeds table so I know when the last time I pulled this stuff out was. So great. I've gone ahead, I've gotten the list of all the feeds we just saw there. It's like, okay, just loop through them. And so I'm going to go through them. And the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to get all the RSS feed items. So go ahead and it says for all those items you saw, everything you saw on the list, go ahead and get the feed. Well, I don't remember what the link was, but that's easy for me because remember we're looping, and I pulled this already from the database. So you can say, hey, get the list of feeds to retrieve. And there's the link. And then I want to do it, and it says since. So just when's the last time it was retrieved? And I can find that in here as well. Great. Now I just loop through and I create a record. And I populate it with all the values that I got from that current list of items. And so what's great about this is the first time you run it, it'll bring back all the videos. And the next time you run it, it will just bring back the newer ones. Now you notice a lot of these look like RSS feeds. This one is a little bit different, and I'll give you the high-level version of this is if you pull from YouTube, you're not really referencing the video directly. You're basically pointing to their streaming video. If you're going to Channel 9 or some other blogs or a podcast and things like that, a lot of times those will have like an MP4 file that's there. And so they actually handle them a little bit differently. So this thing that I glossed over right here just figures out what it should use for the link to the video. But this thing is the one thing I wanted to point you to, because this is something that people have a hard time with sometimes. And I want to make sure to call it out as part of this session. So remember I showed you earlier I can have a lookup field, and that lookup field points to that first table. Well, here I'm creating something in our feed items table. So you have one of these for each of the videos you saw, but I want to point back to the feed, or think about it like a TV show. These are individual episodes of a TV show, and I want to point back to the feed, which is basically the details about my TV show. And so what I need to do is to make that link programmatically, as we're doing here, I need to report back something called the OData ID. This is just an identifier for the feeds that's up here. And we just want to make sure you call that out. And basically what will happen, it'll go ahead and run this every 1 day or whatever you set it for, and pull these back. Now, what's also cool is I can have this go ahead and post to my team. So I can have it posted samples into my readiness folder every time a video came through. And I can also take details like the title and the summary and post it in here. But you can have it post alerts and other things inside of there, which is pretty cool. And then at the end, I would just go ahead and say, you know what, update that record for the feed. Now, technically, I don't need to put all these in here, but I put everything in there anyways, just for the example. And I plugged in the current time. So next time, it'll do everything since we started the process. So if we just sort of scroll it back up, or sort of roll it back up. Every day, in this case, it's just going to say, hey, I've got this thing for a video link that we'll use later on. Get a list of all the feeds, figure out what time it is, loop through everything in the database, and throw them in, loop through all the feed items, and then put them in my database. So pretty easy to do. By the way, I love Power Automate. It has over 400 connectors. Some of them you get free out of the box. Some of them are premium. But I found, by the way, at my last job, I actually shipped connectors. That's why I came to the team, because I became such a big fan. But lots of things you can do there. Great. Let's go back to our app. And before I do that, I've shown you chatbots, I've shown you flows. Before we get into the app, are there any questions? We're sort of powering through this pretty hard.
I don't see any, Mark. It looks like you've actually are doing a great job.
Right. I should get sick more often, Chuck. I think this is working.
You're doing a great job. So.
Okay, so great. So there are some other things that we want to go and do, right? And so I'd like to be able to add favorites. So how do I now enable people to do that? And how do I enable people to rate items or calculate the average? Or how do I retrieve the list of items with ratings and sort by ratings? And how do I do playlists? Now, I'm not going to show you all this for time. I'm going to show you a couple of things that are sort of the major patterns that are here. Now, if I look over here, and these are all what we call galleries. This is one that's horizontal because it's horizontal. And these are some that are vertical. And so in this case, you can see here that I'm just using a data source of playlists. I'm not doing anything special there. All I did is I did take the image that's here by default, because they'll wire stuff up for you with their best intentions automatically, but you can go ahead and change stuff. So for me, when I wanted to do ratings, I said, wouldn't it be cool if we could actually put the ratings control in here? And so I could. And so I can come over here. So we haven't talked about controls, right? And so one of the cool things is you get access to a lot of stuff. And a lot of places that you'll only find here that you won't find in stuff that you're going to find from other parties, like media. Media is super rich. I can pull stuff from camera. I've got audio, and I can do stuff with microphone, video, as you've seen. And if you've got Microsoft Stream, also something you can use. One of the things I'll be doing is copying something one of our colleagues did internally, where they did lunch and learns or brown bags, and they built an app where they could pull this from Stream, part of Office, and people could see it similar to what we have here, but for brown bags. And so you'll see a number of controls that are here, and so I can drag and drop them in here. So in my case, I've added in here this rating control. And so it's just simple to go ahead and add that. And so if you want to add stuff in here, this is sort of the template for that one particular, for all the items in the list. So you can see here, if I say, hey, you know what, I'm going to move this over here, it moves it for everybody. So you can get a good look for, oops. Oh, that was user error. You didn't see it here. I zigged when I should have zagged with my mouse there, and sort of hit the button. We'll go back in. One second. Okay, so let's go back over here. We're going to go ahead and see, we've got our screens. This is home. And so, hey, you know what? How do I show the ones that are recent, right? And so here, it's actually pretty easy. I've got my feed items table, right? And all I'm going to do there is I'm going to say, can you just sort that based on the most recent here, which is published on. Now, when you deal with date times, you have a couple of options. We have a property in the table designer, which is date only, which as the name implies, is just date only. If you go to the table editor, you can also do date time. For me, this is really just for rendering here and to make it look nice. And so I just left it as text, and I just wanted to show you here also that you can convert different field values. This will convert it to a date time value. And then I just click sort. And so sort this table, this column in the table, descending, and you get that's there. So that's all well and good. But what about ratings? How do we do that? And so here we're going to use one of those views I talked about. So you're going to do sort descending. So you're going to get the ones that instead of based on the time, it's going to be based on the rating average, right? Instead of the and so here we're saying, and you, by the way, use this view here, which is feed items with feed detail. and that feed detail is going to help us pull in the graphics for the feed and whatnot. So lots of great stuff you can do. Now, one of the things that I want to show you is that when I did this the first time, I'm kind of notorious for, as my wife would say, not leaving well enough alone, right? And so I created this initially, and you'll see this in the online lab that said, hey, we have a list of feeds and we can just show that list over here. And then I'm like, hey, you know what? Why don't we just take this and make it more advanced? We could show people all the different patterns they were going to do. And so in some cases, I want to show all the items for a feed. In some cases, I want to show just, I want to show all the feeds listed. Sometimes I want to show listed by top rated. And when they click on it, I want to have the first thing they see be the one that they clicked on. So how would I go ahead and do that? And so this is, remember that patch statement? Now, again, I could just link it back to the table, and there's the easy way to do that. But I want to do something a bit more complex just so you knew that you could do it. And by the way, I've got slides that are in the deck that show you the exact syntax. So don't worry about doing screenshots or looking at it here. Now, so far you've seen over here that it refers to items, right? And by the way, I could set a bunch of properties over here too. We haven't spent a lot of time on that, but lots of good content out there for that. But you can also see that I can do stuff when things happen on select. And so here's you're going to see one of those. So one of the things we do is we have this statement called navigate. So in this function area, it looks a lot like Excel and stuff you'll do there. I'm going to drag this down. You can see here that normally you just say navigate to the playlist viewer. Here, I'm passing what's called a context record here, the context mode. So what am I passing through? Well, I'm passing through a bunch of stuff. Now, again, this is like Mark being a little crazy, being a little fancy, but you can do here if you want to do something a bit more advanced. And so I create this record, which the curly braces are doing, and I say, okay, I want to pass through the list type. And so if this is a feed, I might want to show it one way. If it's a playlist, I might want to show it a different way. You know, what's the list that I selected? So this could be, if I'm selecting the, remember I have all the different feeds that are there? That's just going to basically say that's the feed that's there, or to be the playlist that I picked. What's the title? And this is what I want to put on the top of the page. And so you can see here it says CR680_name, right? It doesn't say name. And that's one of the reasons why I showed you this in the beginning. It's an interesting thing. And I'm talking with the team about it right now. In most cases, for most things you use, you're going to use the display name, which is super easy. When you switch over to do something like this, you actually end up using the name. And so again, as you saw some things we looked at earlier, it just had the display name. Here, it's just showing the name. And I'm saying, hey, you know what? Can you just filter the list of items like this? And then can you, if there's a currently selected item, can you give me that? So it's looking for the first one here. So here, I'm just looking at this particular feed. And I'll pull the first item from this list of feeds. But I can also, if we look at some of the other ones, which I'll do right now, if I were to click on this guy here, and you see here, that's the items, but I can go over here to on select. And you'll see here, I'm taking that from the recent items that's selected. And so that allows me to do a bunch of stuff when I get to my next screen. So my next screen here is my playlist viewer. Okay, and so let's take a look at my list. And so here, instead of a table, remember I had selected list items? I just sort of wire that in here. And if I want to go ahead and have my ratings control, we'll look, actually, we won't do that yet. We'll look at this video. It'll say like this item .cr680 video link. Remember, normally you're going to have the regular names in here, but because I'm using these variables, it'll look like that. If I want to use the video, it'll say the selected list current item is this. And if I click on one of these guys on select, it's going to update the context. Now, normally, you won't have to do anything. You just refer to the selected video here. Here, I'm using the selected list current item, just because what this allows me to do is it allows me to, if I always use this, I can pass in a value from another screen and have it go directly to that video. Which will also be helpful in a later version of this if I want my chatbot to link directly in here and go to a video inside of the playlist. So that's more advanced. But you can see here that I can go ahead and do that. Let's show you something else. I want to get the average numbers of ratings. Now, this is something where I did the easy version for makers. So you just saw me do something hard. This is pretty easy. And I'll put a little asterisk here. Remember I talked earlier about the views, and they ran everything on the server, which is great. If you don't run things in the client, and there's a lot of records, it could take a lot of time. The reality is this is running inside of a team. If I look at ratings, there's only, I think, there's going to be maybe 10 people using my team. And so there might be 10 ratings per video. Remember I said earlier, you could only do one. And so for me, I don't really mind bringing them down here because it'll be faster for me. And so I can say, all right, for the ratings that are here, can you go ahead and filter those just for the feed items ID, and then just get their rating and then take the average for that. So it looks like an Excel script. It'll go ahead and pull that in here. That's that defines the value. But if you are using the rating control, it also has this thing in here called on change. So if I were to go ahead and change the value here, it's going to use one of those patch statements out there to do two things for me. One is it's going to add a record for me in my ratings table. And then as I started building it out, I'm like, you know what? For some of the stuff I want to do, I really would like to have the rating inside the main feed item table. And so how do I get it over there? And so this is sort of a quick and easy way to do that. Is again, you wouldn't do this in a bunch of scenarios, and this little exclamation point says, hey, this filter is not going to be great if you're using a lot of records. I said, I already have the average. When I go ahead and put the record in the ratings table, just go ahead and for this feed item ID, go ahead and throw the rating average in there too. Your mileage may vary. Ideally you would do that on the server side, but for a light data set, if you're sort of building out your citizen developer app, it's a great way to go ahead and get started as you go. And so we've just covered a fair amount of ground here. I want to sort of circle back for questions. Anything else, folks? I'd like to ask about, and you know what? I hate looking at an empty screen here. We'll go ahead and make it look pretty.
I think you're on fire, Mark.
Oh yeah, there we go.
There you go. And just because sometimes you do stuff just because you can, look at it. I can go ahead and run every single one of these videos. So you can have interactive elements that are over here. You can really do a lot with what's here. And of course, you can also build out mobile apps as part of what you're doing. All right, so we're going to go off the script for a minute because I think there might be something here I can show you guys. Let me take a look. That's my testing. We go to samples, readiness. You can see there's some new items here. Remember I showed you before it was going to post to Teams? New video posted. And clearly, yeah, there we go. Title is here. And for the YouTube videos, the descriptions come in a different way than the RSS. So that was from an earlier test. So lots of stuff we can see there. And I'm just looking for one of the teams here to see if we have a. Oh, by the way, you can see when it's published, it'll actually run inside this environment. So what you see here, this is the hands-on lab that's live right now. And it'll show you how to pull this stuff in and sort of navigate through these videos. And it get published right here within your channel. Super easy to do. If you have multiple channels, you can deploy it in multiple places as well. Let's sort of pivot back to, oh, here we go. So this is what I was looking for here. So we talked about these out-of-the-box apps and solutions, right? I'm going to show you one called inspections. So one of our teams in Power Apps has been working on these, and what I love about them is that they are really well done. So if you look at this, it looks like it's a Teams app. It looks like it was built inside of Teams, right? And so there's a bunch of learnings of what's there. What's nice is you can use this for scenarios out of the box. So this says inspection. Well, what is inspection? We have some people with COVID and going back to work. We have a very well-known mobile phone company in the US that's using this to go ahead and just make sure their stores are clean in the morning. We have people that are using this to inspect or have talked about using this to inspect pipelines or postal trucks. So it's fairly generic. You can see here that if I was a user, I can go ahead and go ahead and, oh, look at that. Remember I talked about responsive containers? I think I get bonus points to the team if I show that off. So I want to show that it's there, but also it works great on different size devices and mobile. But now I'm a user here. You can see that I can look at any tasks that have been assigned to me. I can go ahead and perform an inspection. And it's like, okay, I'm going to go ahead and let's see here. We'll do this. I'm going to do my morning store walk, right? And here I can say, is it clean and hygienic? What's my inspection list? Is it clean and hygienic? It's okay. Now remember, someone in the store is going to be using this on their phone. And so I can take a photo, I can notes, I can assign a task. Now you say, hey, tasks, does Power Apps come with tasks? It doesn't, but Teams does. And so we actually can use connectors, one of the things that we've got in Power Apps, to connect up and assign tasks and do tasks that are in here. Then I can say, hey, is it clutter-free and accessible? Well, I've got an issue here, and then I might take a photo, but I'll just say it's okay. Then I can go ahead and review it. And we're good to go, and I can submit it. And you see it's doing that behind the scenes. We get a check box that it's been done. Now you might be saying, Mark, that's great, but you know what? I don't actually own a grocery store. I want to inspect a pipeline. How do I go ahead and do that? Well, you can see there's two apps. And so that's an app for people that would be using it sort of on the store floor. And here I can go to manage inspections. Let me go back to regular size here. Got it. And you can see here, I can have a number of different types of inspections. I have different locations. I can go ahead and add a location if I'd like to. I can have look at inspection insights. And again, if you look at this, it looks like it's part of Teams, like the styling, the fonts. And so this is quite good. And so if you want to use this out of the box, you can do it. We work with a phone company that has a color magenta they use. And so they were able to theme certain things pretty easily with what's there out of the box, and also able to extend things out. And so I can call, my detailed walk. I can give it a title. I can hit edit first, but I can give it a title. Locations. I can populate the locations as well. There are action buttons that I can allow people to put in here. There's a picture that I can over here. So this really is sort of super functional, and we've got several of them there today. The team is continuing to invest in these, and these are a great place to learn sort of advanced patterns. Just use them out of the box and provide value for your business right away. Now, keep in mind what I said at the beginning. Dataverse for Teams and Power Apps and Automate and Virtual Agents all are included in your Teams licenses. So this is available to you right now. Why not take advantage of it and use it? So we covered a lot. We talked a little bit about Power Apps. We talked about Power Virtual Agents. We talked about Power Automate. We looked at out-of-the-box apps. We looked at nuances of different things you'd want to do with data. We even went a little deep and talked about patch statements. So hopefully this is a good around the world tour. And if you want that sample, it looks like Charles has shared that in the link. You can go ahead and use that. And one of the things I love about the Power Platform community is we got lots of great folks out there that create videos and blogs and content. And so if you use Twitter, or even if you don't use Twitter, if you just go to the Twitter site and you search for Dataverse, you'll see a whole bunch of videos that were posted in just the last couple of days from folks like Shane or Reza or other members of our great community or members of our own team. And that lab there will help you get started. Uses Automate and apps and Dataverse for Teams. But if there's anything we could do to help you out, we want to make sure you're successful. And if there are scenarios and things like that you'd like to see as templates, we'd love to hear that too.
Thanks, Mark. That was quite a tour. Really appreciate it.
Yeah, this was great. Mark, you mind if I take control back?
Absolutely.
Just for
Thanks,
a couple
everybody.
minutes. Thanks a lot, Mark.
Thanks, Mark.
That was a whirlwind tour.
Well, the joke is I grew up in the Northeast where I learned to talk fast. And then I lived in Latin America for a couple of years for Microsoft. I learned to talk a little bit faster. So I managed to get a lot of stuff in there. So hopefully that lands well. But we'll share the slides. And we have slides that you didn't see that show the details for the different scenarios to answer the questions we talked about.
Cool. Thank you.
So just whoever's left, I know a few people had to leave. Are there any last minute questions that we want to ask?
I had a question. This is Mihir.
Go ahead.
Yeah. So, what is the limitation? Are there any limitations for Dataverse for Teams, and what are the recommendations when to use Dataverse for Teams versus regular Power Apps outside Teams?
Yeah, that's a great question, and I'm glad you mentioned it because I should have mentioned that up front. And so, what are some of the constraints about Dataverse for Teams? And so, one is based on the number of Teams licenses you have, you can have up to 500. And so, if you want more than 500 of them, then you might want to use Dataverse versus Dataverse for Teams, and you can use that for your 501st if you want. The other thing is, what are some of the limits? One is just on the size, and so the size is 2 gigabytes. Now, when we talked about this initially, I was originally like, hey, 2 gigabytes, guys, is that going to be enough? And then we actually looked at what that would store. And so for people that are building apps like we just looked at, that stores roughly 1 million records. And so for things that you're going to be running in the context of a team, it's way more than enough. And I think it's 10 times the editor in the space. So it definitely should be a fair bit for you there. In terms of when you would want to go from Dataverse for Teams to Dataverse, I talk about the 3 C's, right? And so one is you might want more capacity, right? And so, hey, I want more than 2 gigs. I want to store a bunch of images in here, that sort of thing. You may want more control. And so when you go to, it's an interesting thing, right? So a lot of people that use Dataverse for Teams love the fact that the security model is really pretty well tied to owners, members, and guests. We do have folks that say, you know what, I want like super fine-grained control, and I want to be able to have hierarchies, and I want to be able to have just a number of nuances in there tied to business units and whatnot. And so if you want more control like that, then Dataverse is going to be the thing for you. The other thing is about capabilities. And so right now this runs inside of Teams. And so if you want to run stuff outside of Teams, you probably want to go to full Dataverse and one of the full Power Products that's there. You may want to have, while you can do like lightweight offline here, you may want to have mobile offline, or you may want to do some things with the APIs and build some custom apps and do a bunch of things like that. So there may be some things that you'd want to use there on the capabilities front. The good news is online, I've got a blog post that compares the two of them, and so you can see some of the nuances that are there. It is by no means a trial version of Common Data Service, or I guess now Dataverse. It's designed to do the vast majority of things that people need. But one of the things that's great, and this is feedback we had from folks pretty consistently, is like, hey, you know what? The Dataverse, formerly Common Data Service, is great. But I'm building this app, and I don't know if it's going to be a real thing or not, and I don't necessarily want to pay for a database if this is just going to be something that I try and it sort of dies in the vine and whatever. But then they would also say, but you know what? I picked this other thing, and it is a real thing. I picked this other data store. It is a real thing now, and I've got to re-architect everything, and it's just going to take me a bunch of time and money. I don't want to do that. And so one of the great things about Dataverse for Teams, it's, I like to say it's got what you need when you need it. And so if you do get to a position where you're like, you know what? I actually do want some of those added capabilities. You don't need to re-architect it. One of the things you're going to be able to do is to upgrade it in place. So you can take your Dataverse for Teams instance, and you can upgrade it to full Dataverse. You don't have to do it for all of them. You can do it very targeted for specific teams and apps that you built out. Does that answer your question?
Yes, thank you. It explains a lot. Thanks, sir.
Mark, the limitations that you mentioned, I actually give the links to the docs. I also give the links to the environments page and the blog post that you just referred. So if people wanted to look at it, they can see it in the chat window.
Perfect.
Good stuff.
Thank you, Chuck.
Great. And the thing to remember is this is a service. And so we ship software every day. And so if there are things that you're interested in, definitely let us know. And also there's a bunch of stuff we're working on that will roll out periodically as you look at it. So definitely, if you follow blogs, definitely follow that Power Apps blog. We'll be sharing news as new things come out. We've got some great stuff coming.
That's
Any other
great.
questions?
Okay, thank you. So you have on the screen, if you see, we have a short survey. Besides how great this presentation was, we want to know kind of what you want to hear from us in the future. And I'll be sending also a link with this to the meetup group, so you can fill it over there as well.